I'm sitting here at work. I drive for a limousine company. There are not too many limousines in this lot over here, but one car over there. But I'll give you my thoughts on Anderson Silva. It's kind of just like Fedor. Fedor, at the end of his career, he wasn't fighting top guys anymore. Didn't really matter. He's undefeated. So, he's still ranked number one. You're not going to lose that ranking. But, Anderson Silva wasn't fighting top guys either. I mean, it depends what you consider top guys. I mean, Fedor was fighting top guys to an extent, just not the top guys. Not top 10. And neither is Anderson Silva. Think about who has Anderson Silva fought. Chael Sonnen, who almost beat him. And Chael Sonnen stinks. They got him rated top 10, and he stinks. And I don't even know if he was rated top 10 at the time. It doesn't. Who cares what they're rated? He stinks. He's not one of the best fighters. He's maybe like number 30. He's no good. No stand up at all. He's never knocked anybody out. I mean, this is just come on. But kind of like Fedor. Fedor fought Brett Rogers, but Brett Rogers was 10-0 at the time. That was a big fight, man. Two undefeated fighters. I mean, everyone, and he looked good in there. He tried a bunch of submissions and this and that. But Fedor was slipping though, and then he fought, Tim Sylvia, who was ranked up there, but he was on the downside. Those guys stink too. All those UFC fighters, all those champions, those UFC champions, those guys all stink. Frank Mir and there was better fighters in Strikeforce. Overeem, Alistair Overeem at that time was way better than these other clowns. Jacked on roids, but still would have killed those guys. But it reminds me of Fedor. Because even though Fedor was in the UFC, he was fighting these guys that, were a few years behind in skill level. And that's kind of like Anderson Silva. Then they gave him Stephan Bonner. And, of course, he knocked out Chael Sonnen again. Or he beat him again by knocking him out. But, so he had gone years without fighting anybody that was, really up there. I mean, he fought Vitor, and that was a long time ago, like years ago. And Vitor wasn't on roids like he is now during that fight. Because, if Vitor right now, just turned 2014, Vitor right now would just kill Anderson Silva. He's about to kill just about anybody. And then when he did fight, who's ranked number 2 in the world, Chris Weidman just dominates him and knocks him out. Anderson Silva was disrespecting him, which makes him look like he's the better fighter, but there's no points for disrespecting somebody. That's just nonsense. We all know that, and it works to an extent, but when you start going against number 2 ranked guys in the world, that Nick Diaz taunt people style of fighting, that does not work with these top guys. It doesn't. And calling somebody, a name and this and that, and making faces at them, that doesn't work with the number 2, number 3 fighter in the world. It doesn't, because they're too skilled, they're too mentally like Carlos Condit. I still think Nick Diaz should have won that fight, but that did no effect on Carlos Condit at all. If Carlos Condit should have just been a little bit more aggressive, about 25% more aggressive in that fight, and he probably would have legitimately won, or he would have legitimately gotten knocked out, which is probably what would have happened. But that whole thing, taunting, it did not work with Condit at all, because he's a top fighter, one of the top fighters in the world. He wasn't just going to stand there and be a punching bag for Nick Diaz. And same thing with Chris Weidman. I mean, he didn't fall for any of those antics. Anderson Silva was doing. I mean, what was he doing? He was like dancing with his hands on his side. I mean, just really stupid stuff. But, and then when he fought for real, you know, I mean, I don't know how Chris Weidman didn't knock Anderson out in the first round in the second fight. You know, that just happened. I mean, geez, he just totally was killing him in that first round, and then he checks a kick, and, you know, and that's that. But it reminds me of Fedor. You know, these guys, you have to, if you want to stay at the top of your game, you have to stay up there at the top. You know, you can't be fighting guys that are 2-3 years behind. Same thing with GSP. GSP fights Nick Diaz, who's been retired and not training, and who's rusty. Then when he goes and fights Johnny Hendricks, who's at the very top of his game. Johnny Hendricks has been fighting, you know, hard fights. He's been fighting regularly, and look at it. I mean, that's a big difference in skill level. You know, had Nick Diaz and GSP fought when Nick Diaz was like fighting like every 4 or 5 months, it seemed like, when Strikeforce, he was on a tear, man. He wasn't rusty at all. He was just killing everybody, and he had so much confidence, and he was younger. I think Nick Diaz would have beat GSP back then. I really do. You know, he didn't look the same in the fight with GSP. He had been off for a while, and he's older. That age makes a big difference. It really does. I mean, I remember mountain biking. You don't mountain bike for 6 months, and it's my God, when you get out there, it's a completely different thing. Think about if you're a skateboarder and you don't skate. You don't get on your skateboard for a month or two. Oh, man. It all falls apart. So anyway, that's just my thoughts on that, man. You got to stay at the top. You got to stay at the very top. You don't want to be fighting these guys down below, you know, that are... You're not. Your skill level is gonna drop down to theirs, and I think that's just what happened. You know, they didn't have Anderson Silva fighting anybody that was any good. You know, Chael Sonnen and then Stephan Bonner, and that's years that went by. That's the only people he fought, and then all of a sudden they give him number 2, and it's like you're setting somebody up for failure by doing that, because when you get you're look at like John Jones. John Jones is going to have his game upped. He's going to have his game upped a lot from that fight with Alexander Gustafsson, because it's like, whoa, man, this is a challenge, and he's going to learn a lot from that fight. He's going to be even better. Whereas if they just throw him somebody else to just be a kicking bag for, John Jones is not going to. Then he's not going to progress and get better. You know what I mean? So you want to stay fighting those top guys where you almost lose, but you still win. That's where you gain the most knowledge, you know. So, but yeah, it's kind of sad. And then yeah, also, he's just really old. I mean, much older in these last few years. You age a lot and you're in late 30s. You know, it's a big difference between 35 and 39. Big difference. So that's that. So he just needs to retire, and that's the end of that. Talk to you guys later.